In this video, we'll look at how we can archive Office 365 accounts using MailStore Server. We'll look at how we can synchronize MailStore users automatically against Office 365 accounts and keep a central user database. And we'll look at how we can set up individual jobs to archive multiple users. We'll be using the MailStore Server help guides, and specifically the implementation guide for Office 365. So the first thing we need to do is synchronize our users. Before we can do that, however, we do need to add a couple of Microsoft components to the server running MailStore, specifically to allow us to use the Azure PowerShell commands. I've already done that. There's two links in the description below, link 1 and link 2, for the two components you need to just download and install. Once you've done that, you should have the Microsoft Active Directory module for PowerShell scripts, which you can run up, and we can now start entering some commands. So link 3 should take us to the commands that we need to enter. So the first thing you need to do is actually connect through to your Azure environment, which is connected through to Office 365. So we'll copy and paste that command. And it's going to ask us for the credentials for a user account, an admin user account in your Office 365 environment. Okay, so that's returned the command. So we're now signed into the Office 365 terminal. So what I like to do is if we run this command here to check the current service principals, it's just a good way of checking that you are connected through, because we're receiving data, so we know we're now connected as we expect. And we're actually going to need to run this command here. We're creating a new service principal. So I've got this command listed below in the description. But what we need to do is change this element here to be the account, or I should say the domain that you're running Office 365 under, and we need to assign a new password. So again, I've created a copy of that command and I've edited it so that it includes my credential details. So if we run that command there. So this will create a new principal, but we now need to add a role to that principal using this command. So cut and paste that. Okay, so we're done. So we're now logged in and we've created an account as needed. Okay, so we've now created this service principal, which will give us access to be able to query the user database. So at this point, we're going to switch into MailStore and configure the directory services integration. So this is a fresh install of MailStore Server. We'll need to go into administrative tools, users and archives, and directory services. You notice that the directory service type is Office 365. And we now need to start adding in the credentials here. So our service principal is we can get from that command that we've just entered. So in my example, my service principal is MailStore SP / my domain name. The password again we created in the command. So this is just a unique password for this session. There we go. And the domain name is the same domain, so we can just copy that from there. Okay. So we can choose which users to synchronize. By default, it's going to only synchronize users that have an Exchange account in Office 365 and a mailbox. But we can also choose to only synchronize a specific group of users. So if we click on the three dots here, it's now connected through to Office 365, and it's showing me a list of any groups that I have. I've just got the one group set up. You may have many here, but it's a good idea to create a group of users specifically that you want to archive. That way you're only going to synchronize those users into MailStore, and you're not going to start archiving any mailboxes you have for other reasons. I would tick this option here to automatically delete the users in MailStore Server. What that's referring to is when this synchronization happens, if there's an account that no longer exists in Office 365, but it did exist in MailStore, it removes it. So it's keeping the two databases in sync. Typically, if a user leaves a company, you would remove their account from Office 365, and likewise, you want to remove their account from MailStore. Now, it's worth noting that if you remove an account, you don't actually remove the archive. It's fundamentally just the ability to log in and carry on archiving that mailbox that you're removing. So we'll test those settings first, and they're connected through, and they've found 3 accounts. So test settings is a useful way of double checking it's going to pull in the accounts you expect to before you actually allow it to synchronize. And you can see that it's pulled in the full names and the email addresses associated with that account. And then we'll perform a synchronization, which does fundamentally the same thing, but it should have now created a set of users under the users accounts. So now we've synchronized the users within MailStore, the next stage is to start archiving users' mailboxes. But before we can actually do that, we need to give an account in Office 365 the right to be able to impersonate another account. So if we go back to the help guide, and we go to link, well, we're on link 3, so if we go to link 4, we can now set up the application impersonation. So we're going to follow through these stages. So it's asking us to log into the Exchange online portal and go into the admin section under Exchange. So I have a window open already here. So here we go. So this is my Office 365 Admin Center. Here's my Exchange Center. So it's asking me to go into admin roles, and we need to create a new admin role. We need to give it a name. Let's call mine MailStore, spelled correctly. We need to add a role, and the role that we need to add is application impersonation. And that's the role that allows this account to impersonate another account, effectively request the contents of its mailbox. And we need to add a member to this role, and the member is the account that we're going to use to log in with. So this is usually a dedicated account for the role, or it can be a reused administrator account. So I'm going to use this as support account. Okay. So now if we switch back to MailStore and we go into Archive Email, click on Email Servers, we can now set up a job to archive an Exchange platform. Now, our Office 365 is running on Exchange, so it doesn't have its dedicated link here, but it is in effect an Exchange server. We're going to do a multiple mailbox job. We don't need to fill in anything for the host. It will detect that from the email address, and we need to now log in as that account that we've given impersonation rights. So in our case, it's the support account. Okay, we choose next. So this job is going to go and archive each user's mailbox. It's going to exclude the deleted items, drafts, junk email, and outbox by default. You can select here if you want to change that and add any specific folders. You just untick the option and decide which folders you want to exclude or include there. We're going to archive all messages, including messages that have only recently entered the mailbox. So we're not going to choose the option to only archive messages older than a specific range. And we're not at this stage not going to delete any messages from the mailboxes. But you can do that if once you've got the archiving up and running, you can use MailStore to prune old messages from within users' mailboxes. We'll leave the timeout as default and the number of sessions running as default. Choose next. The job is by default configured to archive all accounts that are set up in MailStore. And if you leave it on that option and you choose the option to synchronize the directory services every time the job runs, then if you add any new users to Office 365, they will appear here automatically and be archived automatically. You do, of course, have the option, if you prefer, to set up a job to only archive specific users, and you can select them accordingly. So we're going to name the jobs something a little bit more obvious. So Office 365 user mailboxes. And I'll choose the option to run the job as soon as I click Finish. At this stage, it sometimes takes time for the impersonation rights to propagate, so don't worry if you get an error at this point. Leave it 5 minutes and rerun the job again, and it should have updated. Occasionally, Microsoft's commands do lag across all of their servers. Okay, so this time the jobs are connected and we can see that it's starting to process items and archive those items. So it must be connecting through to those three mailboxes correctly. Now, obviously this is quite a small user mailbox I'm testing with here. If you're archiving a very large mailbox, at this point this job's potentially going to take quite a while to synchronize everything in the mailbox, but from this point onwards it's only going to be synchronizing the changes in that mailbox, so it should be significantly quicker. So we'll let this job run through to completion. It might be at this stage you want to leave the job running, or you can cancel the job and switch it into automatic mode, knowing that it'll just trickle overnight to catch up, but I'll show you how to do that in a moment. Okay, so the second time I ran that job, it's archived as I'd expect, and you can see we've got a green tick and it's found 1700 new messages in this case. So the final stage is to run this job automatically. So if you right click on the job, choose automatic, you can choose how often to run the job, or in effect what you're doing is saying run the job now, then wait this amount of time and then run the job again. Now typically with Office 365 we would say you don't really want to be running the job more than possibly every hour or so. So I'll put in 3600 seconds. You can experiment with that figure. It all depends on the number of mailboxes, the size of those mailboxes, how many messages there are that are new every time the job runs. So there's not one figure that suits everybody, but you don't really want the job running constantly. You want some sort of downtime between it running to you not completely use all your bandwidth. You can choose the option as well to exclude a time of day not to run the job. So you might find there's a backup window that you want to make sure the job's not running during certain hours of the evening, so you can define that there. So we'll click OK, and that job will now carry on in the background, and it should be archiving. So hopefully that was a nice sort of introduction to how you get to MailStore working with Office 365 and the basic setup to get you archiving users' mailboxes. It doesn't stop there by any means. It's also possible to archive users' folders individually. If you want different retention policies on those folders, you might want to delete messages older than say 3 months for a certain group of users, but maybe a year for another group of users. That can all be done by just having different jobs with different users applied to those jobs. You might want to archive shared mailboxes or public folders, and that's all possible as well. And there's guides on the MailStore help that I've linked below that talk you through the subtle type of jobs that do that. And there's also many other features that I'll be doing more videos about. So hopefully you found that useful.